everyone, I'm going to be looking at a short story called Cure here in just a moment. It is a zombie short story and originally appeared in a really small anthology. I don't even recall the name of it at this point, but just a small royalty anthology that didn't really end up paying out any. Had a lot of those early in my career. Right now, as you're watching this, if it's in the month of October in 2020, you can join me for 31 Stories of Halloween on my Patreon page. That's going every single day in October, a new short story. Going into November, I'm going to do NaNoWriMo Live. So, the first 50,000 words of a novel, I am going to begin writing that live, and a little bit each day until I get to 50,000 words. That may not be the end of the novel. I don't have that figured out yet. The story I'm doing today, Cure, will actually appear in 31 Horrors for the holidays, which will be in December. So, right now, every day in October, everybody on my Patreon is getting a new short story every day, including some of the videos of me either reading or, in some cases, writing or editing those stories. And this one will appear in the month of December. So, let's go ahead and take a look at Cure. Alright, Cure by Jay Wilburn. There is a cure. It came at a great price, but we found it. I'm not sure how you quantify the price of something like this. I don't know if it is measured by the number of lives involved or the quality of the lives that were sacrificed. Dr. Tatiana Halo is the most intelligent and creative person I have ever met, and she is dead. Dr. Halo was bitten, which is quite dumb in our facility. We were the bioweapons research division, so we had zero physical contact with our subjects and materials. We've just released our test subjects back into the wild. All our rotten eggs are in one zombie-infected basket. Either this works or we are done. Alright, let me make that a hyphenated word. Puppy is the term for deploying the test subjects far enough away that they don't find their way back to their original site. Zombies have a tendency to go back to cluster zones. The soldiers that drove them out puppy didn't come back either. The drone cameras revealed why. Now I'm quarantined with my colleagues looking at me through the glass. I don't think they're going to be letting me out of here. I hope I live long enough to see the blight that Dr. Halo created complete its work. From quarantine, I can see the sign, "No cure for zombies." It was put up by some anonymous worker involved in converting the facility before we arrived. The military personnel assigned to us were particularly disheartened by this assessment placed on the odds of our success. It was Dr. Halo that brought everyone into the lab. We were standing shoulder to shoulder with scientists, soldiers, techs, and maintenance. Instead of just taking the cardboard down, she ceremoniously wielded a Sharpie and marked through the "no" on the sign. There were chuckles and snorts around the room. Then she said, "I'm leaving this up because this is our job. Everyone is hanging up their signs of surrender, and we're here because we must mark them out. There is a cure. We will find it. Science is about reason and experiment, but it's also about hope and faith. Every scientist..." I'm going to have her say "who" instead of that. I was letting the narrator get away with it, but I think she would use it properly. Every scientist who set out to cure a disease succeeded because they were willing to take a leap of faith. History is full of smaller forces defeating larger armies. When the odds were down to zero, they still won. The sign writers are surprised over and over again by the people who refuse to accept no as an answer. They surrender before the battle starts because they don't have faith or hope. We're all alive because we fought the zombies to get here. We are here because we won, and because there is still enough hope and faith left to keep fighting. Our enemy is the zombie, and he outnumbers us. We will cure him. He is already dead. We just have to remind him of it. Screw surrender, screw the sign writers, and screw the zombies. Everyone cheered and chanted, "Screw the zombies." It became a standard greeting in the mess hall. It was a mantra to keep trying when something went wrong. It was a victory cry when something went right. When the generator burned out beyond repair, maintenance said, "Screw surrender." They used car parts to rig it back up, and it is still working. When the zombies destroyed our antenna, the soldiers said, "Screw the zombies." They fought them off, repaired the equipment, and got back in without losing a single man. When someone hit a dead end in the lab, everyone else said, "Screw the sign writer." It held our group together. The commander and maintenance The commander had maintenance paint "Screw Surrender, Screw the Sign Riders, and Screw the Zombies" dash Dr. H on the wall in the mess hall. It occurred to me that it was just another sign, but I kept my observation to myself. I did not agree with Dr. Halo's marriage of faith into science. It was no good arguing the point with her. She was smarter than me, and she would win the argument whether she was right or not. Science is strictly reason, and reason must drive the scientific method. Data must be interpreted without emotion and lead to the next logical course of experimentation. Of course, she created the cure, so what do I know? Our facility was a former Cold War silo and bunker in Kansas. A football stadium and a small university were built on the land above it. The video of soldiers running and fighting up the stadium steps to restore our antenna was spectacular. Our work focused on developing a bioweapon option for battling the zombies. The CDC in Atlanta was overrun before the U.S. Zombie Research Network was ever established. NORAD focused on, I'm going to capitalize all that across. I won't do the periods, but we'll just make it a capital. NORAD focused on conventional weapons and housed part of the shadow government. Seattle worked on taming and training research. They were the first to fall. The team at Fort Knox worked toward isolating the bacteria or virus that caused the zombies to rise in the first place. We were in contact with the facility in Denver, but their work was classified above the level of anyone here in Kansas. There was one in Florida which transferred data concerning general zombie research to each of the other facilities. The doctor there was crazy before the zombies came. We lost contact with all of them. Each of the other facilities reported losses to the zombies. A couple managed to finally broadcast about full breaches before they went dark. They also reported conflicts within their military personnel. The Florida facility may have just lost their broadcast ability, but we have no way of knowing unless they come back online. NORAD, let's capitalize that again. NORAD broadcast the announcement of their fall and issued the final executive order from the acting president to Denver and Kansas to deploy any developments from our research at will, and as we were able with extreme prejudice. I don't know what Denver accomplished before they went dark. We get along with our military detachment well enough. Dr. Halo played a large role in that relationship while she was still alive. The commander reiterated the final order from NORAD and raised Dr. Halo's clearance to include access to all facility resources and command codes to use at her discretion. The soldiers also wanted us to succeed because they hate the zombies and what we do hurts them. We let them observe the experiments. I thought it was bad policy and creepy. Dr. Halo insisted on transparency. When I confronted her about ending the practice, she simply said, "Dr. Smith, there's nothing on TV." We have a game and movie room, but I took her meaning. We spent time observing zombie behavior in the field using the ground and aerial drones. We calculated decay rates, collected data on population densities, we tagged some, we tried to establish migratory patterns, we watched them eat instead of rescuing the victims, and we found out about as much as we knew before we entered the bunker. None of this data was remotely useful in any way. Alright, I'm going to do a little detour here. That short paragraph that I just read was actually a much longer section that detailed all this research they were doing. So I'm going to pull up the original of this particular story. And here in green, I usually highlight in yellow, but it's a zombie story, so I went with green. Dark green was actually a little too dark to see, so I went with a lighter, more, I guess, neon toxic green there for the zombies. So this section that's highlighted that I'm about to read was pulled from the story, the version that I'm going to publish, and that was and that we were just looking at. And this is the unedited version with all this data from them observing the zombies with aerial drones. And you can see what was there. I kind of was a little bit self-indulgent with it. So this whole section was cut out of the story, and I'm just going to read it as an aside for you to see what was there before I cut it. So again, everything in green has been cut into that one paragraph that I just read earlier. But we'll see what it was before all that cutting was there. Hey man, thanks for coming in. You're just in time to see the, the writing that I cut out. We saw a zombie creating patterns on the ground using bones from its victims. We assigned a drone to it for a week and ran the patterns to it created through symbolic and linguistic algorithm programs, but we found nothing conclusive. We photographed a group of subjects that were carrying instruments in what appeared to be a formation of a marching band. We sent a ground drone back to tag them, but were unable to locate the cluster again. We saw a cluster form on the football field above us. They appeared to be reenacting plays associated with American football. This was recorded on the exterior cameras for 19 minutes 31 seconds until they dispersed. A similar, less organized cluster was spotted by aerial drone in the same sort of mimicry of on a baseball field using discarded equipment. We tagged a subject that was striking other zombies with a crowbar. He appeared to actually demobilize two zombies from strikes to the head. We would have forwarded the data to the Seattle training program, but they were already dark by then. We photographed him striking inanimate objects as well. He was demobilized after traveling 23.4 kilometers. Aerial surveillance indicated he was likely struck by a vehicle. We recorded thousands of subjects in cars, including 4 in moving cars. 3 of these appeared to have been accidentally set in neutral. One appeared to be a running vehicle, which collided with another vehicle at 23 kilometers per hour at the moment of impact, about after 14 seconds that covered 151 meters. The airbag deployed and demobilized the subject through a blunt trauma brain injury related to the crash. We tagged a subject that was opening and closing mailboxes. It continued this behavior for 2,110 observed boxes. It stopped 3 times to join feedings already in progress before being demobilized by a gunshot to the head. We photographed a subject mimicking watering flowers on the roof of a building using a severed head as a watering can. It continued this behavior for 23 hours 12 minutes before being demobilized by shrapnel from a gas explosion in an adjacent building. We observed thousands of incidents of subjects ascending and descending stairs, both upright and by crawling. We observed one instance of a subject sliding down the stair railing. It was demobilized by blunt force trauma to the head on impact. We observed only one instance of a zombie climbing a ladder. It fell after 1 minute 3 seconds from the 9th rung and was demobilized by impalement through the head of a lawn ornament. We observed a subject lacking its body below the soldiers. It walked on its hands for 2.2 kilometers before being demobilized by being trampled by a horse. We tagged a subject rowing a boat that was raised on sawhorses. It continued this behavior for 41 hours, 3 minutes, 22 seconds. It then moved 19 meters before stopping again. Aerial surveillance indicated the rowboat was overturned and the subject had been demobilized by 3 gunshots to the body and 1 to the head. Once we had a subject that stood pushing an empty swing. We tagged him. According to the computer, it is still there, presumably still pushing the swing. There was another that was walking around a building that we determined had been used for file storage for the county school system before the zombies came. This subject would not stop. The subject would stop at each of the 4 corners of the building. It would follow the course of other zombies with its eyes and head for intervals that varied between 23 seconds and up to 7 hours, 13 minutes, 18 seconds. The average interval was 17 minutes, 11 seconds. The current mode time for the intervals is 16 minutes, 54 seconds. It stopped at each corner regardless of whether other zombies were present. It always moved clockwise around the block. It always stopped at each corner. There was no statistical significant difference between the durations of intervals at each corner. There were no statistically significant variations related to the presence of other subjects, the weather conditions, the temperature, or the time of day or night. We tagged the subject. All this data for this subject is still being tracked by the computer, and the zombie is still rounding the block. None of this data was remotely useful in any way. Okay, so that section got cut down to this single paragraph, which I'll read again. We spent time observing zombie behavior in the field using the ground and aerial drones. We calculated decay rates, collected data on population densities, we tagged some, we tried to establish migratory patterns, we watched the meat instead of rescuing the victims, and we found out about as much as we knew before we entered the bunker. None of this data was remotely useful in any way. So I kind of enjoyed that little section of asides as we went along, but probably the story is stronger without it. So it got shared there, but when this story is published on Patreon, it won't have that section included. Dr. Halo shifted our bioresearch into the realm of fungi spores. This research led to a genetically altered fungus that was dubbed the Blight, ZX 2012. The number does not stand for the year. I'm not clear on the significance of its designation. Before we entered the facility, I was on the phone with my mother as she died. I kept waiting for her to hang up, but she must have dropped the phone when the creatures broke through her door. I know she was in the kitchen because over the sounds of teeth and moans, I could hear the sharp click of the clock shaped like a cat, with its tail swinging from side to side. I was frozen in place with the phone to my ear, listening to the ticks and screams. I don't remember hanging up, but I suppose logic dictates I must have. The day we came to the facility, we hustled to the roof of the lab at the university to be evacuated by helicopter. The zombies broke in and filled the stairwells. The elevator shut down, and we had to run toward the monsters as the soldiers shot them so we could get to the roof. I was close enough to feel the cold breath of one of them. I didn't even realize I'd urinated on myself until we were in the helicopter flying over a city in flames. With all of that, I've never been more terrified than when Dr. Halo included me in the presentation of her findings to the commander. She wanted me to be ready to respond to any questions that might be directed at me. She did not want me to make her look stupid, so we had practiced. What is significant? Okay, what is significant is that the blight mutates to attack necropermanin's flesh. Dr. Halo narrowed her eyes at me, and I thought I might wet myself again. She said, "What does that mean?" I spoke and heard my voice shake. Zombie flesh is dead. It behaves differently from other human flesh. She nodded. That is true. But explain what that means. Be specific, but keep it simple. I swallowed twice before I spoke. Fluids from zombified subjects carry an unidentified contagion for the condition. The contagion is fatal to humans. The contagion reanimates clinically dead subjects exposed before the time of death. The interval from clinical death to reanimation varies widely from subject to subject, and experiments to determine mitigating factors are inconclusive. She closed her eyes and I felt cold inside. She said, "Don't focus on where we failed. Tell what we have discovered." I said, "Biological organisms are repelled by necropermanent's flesh, including organisms normally associated with carrion. Bacteria does interact with necropermanent's subjects, but it is eventually killed by whatever makes a zombie a zombie. This includes bacteria associated with normal biological decay, but also the genetically engineered bacteria we created prior to developing the blight." "Much better," she smiled at me. "Keep going." I said, "Decay does occur in necropermanent's flesh through bacterial interaction, mechanical stress, and chemical weathering, but at a significantly slower rate than in standard necrotic flesh. Once the subjects are demobilized through destruction of the brain, decay proceeds more rapidly. Experiments related to this phenomenon are inconclusive." She shook her head and stood. "Just sit quietly and let me do the talking. You don't sell the military on words like inconclusive. This is too important." The commander hadn't asked me any questions. I don't know why she thought he ever would with her in the room. I was invisible. If they had asked me a question, I wouldn't have heard it anyway. The entire time they were talking, all I could hear was the sharp click of my mother's cat clock, and its tail swinging, and its eyes sliding from side to side. I pictured her being torn apart on the floor next to her cell phone, but all I heard was the clock. Dr. Halo theorized that the bacteria were involved in fueling the zombies' unknown sources of energy and locomotion apart from observable cellular, nervous, or metabolic activity. She also believed the bacterial interaction possibly helped bridge the initial contagion transfer into live flesh through fluid exchange, surface bites, and scratches. We never had time to test either hypothesis. Despite these assertions into the role of bacteria, Dr. Halo made the leap of faith into fungi that led to the blight. The commander struck his desk with an open hand, and the cat clock stopped. When I looked up, he smiled at Dr. Halo. We left the room with approval to proceed on the blight, even though we did not have all the data we needed to back up our findings. Now she is a zombie. Dr. Halo's sacrifice was her final leap of faith. In close quarters, the blight spreads and is clearly working. It will probably take longer in the wild. The soldiers that released our infected subjects did not return. They were behaving oddly and got themselves bitten. They became zombies themselves. I'm almost out of food, and clearly the observers are not going to give me any more. They are not communicating with me. I think they blame me. The blight doesn't spread as well in the field. I've hacked the drones from inside my prison to observe this. One shouldn't keep a man in a cell that he helped design and to maintain. The drones are showing the results that Dr. Halo expected. Blight-infected zombies have distinctly green skin. There are open, weeping splits in the necropermanent's flesh, which progress in severity. Muscle breakdown accelerates. The infected subjects are eventually demobilized by total liquefaction of the brain. The blight would spread faster if zombies bit each other. This was the problem that led Dr. Halo to determine the necessary catalyst to accelerate the spread of the blight to an eventual pandemic level. Humans are not immune. When a human contacts the blight, it drives them mad in some way. It leads human subjects to behave irrationally, which almost always leads to a zombie breach in the human cluster's security. Zombies bite the infected humans. The zombie subject is infected with the blight even as they infect the human with the zombie contagion. For every blight-infected human that is attacked, typically 12 to 20 zombies contract the blight from consuming the infected flesh. These zombies then spread the blight more rapidly through incidental contact with other zombies, while blight-infected fluids are still on them and in their system. The blight-infected flesh from the infected human is expelled periodically from the zombies for up to the full cycle of the disease. This increases infection through incidental contact with other zombie subjects. As these zombies attack other human prey, the blight is transferred to other feeding zombie subjects. This process is true with zombie subjects otherwise infected, but a zombie that contracts the blight directly from an infected human is exponentially more contagious. I may not be around when it happens, but the zombies will be gone. The spores will likely exist in North and South America for centuries in a dormant state after the last zombie falls here. In that time frame, if not much sooner, they will be carried to other continents and begin the process again. Dr. Halo allowed the blight to enter our facility when she infected herself. I panicked and locked myself into quarantine using an encryption code that won't be struck by accident. I took as many supplies as I could, but not enough. The madness was hard to watch. Zombies were let in, as Dr. Halo predicted, and through her final leap of faith, she became the new patient zero after the release of our initial subjects plateaued. There was not much of her left when she finally turned. Her skin was already green and weeping when she stood back up. I could see her spine, her hip bones, and most of her skull. Her green leg muscles were macerated. She stood anyway. She grinned blindly at me. She reached out her dripping arms and left bloody, diseased handprints on my glass observation window. Following the wall, she reached the stairs and led the infected zombies back out of the open security doors. She was as exceptional in death as she was in life. I've tried to sleep, but in my dreams I hear the ticking of my mother's cat clock. It did not occur to me to hack the drones until some time later. Initial cameras show that she and most of the rest of the zombies have left. I have not spotted her outside, but her legacy has spread over 100 kilometers in every direction and is accelerating still. By this point, her brain should be completely liquefied, but I wouldn't be surprised to see her marching on the outer edge of the spread of the blight as she shows the way. The blight has finished all of them inside except for 3. Soon I will starve and go mad myself. I brought a hazmat suit with me. Once the brains of the last trio of observers finish leaking out of their heads, maybe I'll suit up and go outside for a walk. I can see Dr. Halo's sign over the exposed skull bone of our last standing scientist. Dr. Halo was right. There is a cure for zombies, but it was always an option. If you poison the food source, the population will become extinct. The course to a zombie-free world was so very simple and transparent indeed. Mission accomplished. So that is the short story Cure that will appear with 31 Horrors for the Holidays. I particularly like that one. It's one that kind of remembered in the back of my mind. I wanted to see if I could do a very clinical short story about the zombies, but then still have it propel itself forward. That little green section I read in the original version was probably a step too far, where I'm just kind of listing off numbers and things. But I even found that interesting. But again, you gotta kill your darlings sometimes and shorten the story up. And I think it works better as a slightly shorter story.